today we are in a big transition, or at least last week was a big transition, and now we're moving from a major section of the Bible that is Genesis 1 to 11, and now we're in our second major section of the Bible. So as I said last week, congratulations, you made it. You made it through. It's going to start reading very differently. If you've read the Bible before, you might have recognized that in the past. If you've ever read Genesis before, things start to look different. They start to feel different. The narratives, they are presented in different ways. Why is that? Anyone can recall? Okay, yep. Prehistory is what has been covered in Genesis 1 to 11. A lot of the things that I've been saying for the past many weeks, I'm going to stop saying, essentially, because we have been in that section, and I've repeated myself because we were in that section, but now we're transitioning. So now you're going to start hearing new things. We're no longer in prehistory. Now we're in the era of the ancestral tales. So this is the family stories of the people of Israel after we cover these main stories of, you could say, the foundations of the world: creation, the beginnings of civilization, flood, the Nephilim story. Sorry, reverse the order of those. The Nephilim story, then the flood, the reconstitution of human civilization, and then the ascension to the Tower of Babel story. Descending, ascending. They're building a tower, but really humanity is continuing to fall to a low point, to a new low point. And that low point results in what happening? You guys remember? Okay, the languages that means something more than just what that really means is the division of the peoples into their relative cultures, their relative nations. Hi, good morning. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. So what is happening in that story is the formation of different bodies of people, right? That all come from a centralized point. Remember that? So the idea is all nations have their birth at Babylon. Remember, Babel means Babylon. And what also is happening in that story? What is happening beneath the surface, behind the scenes that we covered?
What's the word? Different. Is it Nephilim or something?
It wouldn't be Nephilim.
I don't remember the word, but yeah, like different sons of gods to watch over the other people.
Yeah. Actually, your language that you just used there, watch, later parts of the Bible describes these sorts of beings as watchers. Okay. So, so the idea of the assigning of powers and principalities and rulers and spiritual authorities over the different nations, right? And we look at Deuteronomy 32 for that, and some other verses.
What's the word? Sons of God, the God, but not God.
Yeah, B'nai Elohim. So sons of God. Elohim is a generic term for all spiritual beings. B'nai Elohim is, I'm a son of the Elohim. I belong to the category of Elohim, right? In the same way that if you said, I'm a son of firefighters, or I'm a son of America, I am, you know what I mean? I belong to the category of those who are in this group, okay? Now, it says, when the Most High apportioned the nations, when he set the boundaries of humankind, he did so according to the number of the gods, or the sons of God, right? Some translations might say according to the number of the heavenly beings, right? It just depends on how your translator is wanting to translate that verse for clarity. And then he says, but the Lord's portion was what? Sorry, the Yahweh's portion. Remember, Lord, in all caps, is the divine name Yahweh. So Yahweh's portion was what?
It was probably everything, but probably just primarily like Israel.
Okay, yeah, but the Lord's portion was Jacob, Israel his allotted inheritance. Okay, so we're covering, and we talked about that at the end of last week, but we're going to continue to cover it. This transition point from the God who is the creator God, the God who is eternally existing, unlike anything else, right? The idea is all of these other nations, these pagan gods, they begin to exist in their own lore, in their own storytelling about the gods. They begin to exist. But the Israelites and the God of Israel doesn't begin to exist. The God of Israel is an eternally existent being. Check out week 3 as we talk about the difference between pagan gods, and that was before we even got into the scripture, just who is the God of the Bible. So why do the nations have these gods and Israel the true God? And why is Israel's God the God of the nations? But their unique God, right? So this sort of question of how is it the case that Israel's God is God over everything, right? Not just like, let's say I'm living in ancient Egypt and I have my gods, right? I'm not necessarily claiming that my gods are gods over every other nation, okay? Unless I win in a battle, right? And again, we talked about this in week 3. If I go and I conquer another nation, my God is now superior to their God, right? However, when Israel gets conquered, they don't, they say that their God is still in control and their God made it happen. So why is that the case? Because their God is a sovereign God, a God who has ultimate control, ultimate power, ultimate authority over everything, right? That's what is being claimed in their scriptures as opposed to these other nations, okay? So within the text of the Bible itself, it's giving you an explanation as to what is the difference between, let's say you're an ancient Israelite and you are asking, what is the difference between what I'm reading about and why do these other nations have these other gods, right? Your answer would be God gave them over, the Most High God, to whom all the nations belong, as we read in Psalm 82. God has taken his place in the divine council. Amidst the gods, he holds judgment. He says, how long will you just and judgely? This is Psalm 82. And then it says at the end of that psalm, rise up, O God, for all the nations belong to you. Okay? So you have at the same time, God gave them over, Romans chapter 1, to worship created things, right? He allotted these lesser deities to them, right? That he gave them over, it says, to the lusts and impurities of their heart. Well, at the same time, he's a unique God of Israel, right? And through the story of the Bible, the main focus of the story is those whom God scattered in Genesis 10 and 11, he will reconstitute, he will bring back, okay? So think of it as consecutive exiles, right? Exile from the garden, exile from, you could say, humanity generally or corporately from God at the Tower of Babel, right? And exile of Israel from the land, ultimately at the end of the New Testament, and he's going to bring all of them back to himself through the Messiah. Okay? Does that make sense? A letting go, a disinheritance, you could say, of humanity generally, but a chosen one, Abraham, who's going to be the one in whom he's going to bring everyone back. Okay? Any questions about that? That was sort of the end of the last week. It's a little complicated, I know, but this is the story of the Bible. And we'll get into it already, but I just want to frame this for you. We're about to read the selection of Abraham, and we're going to read what God says to Abraham when he selects him. And he says, go to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will make of you a great nation. And in you, in your lineage, all families, in your family, all families of the entire world will be blessed. Okay? The Apostle Paul in the book of Galatians says that is the gospel. Okay? So when we talk about the good news of the kingdom, right? When Jesus sat down, he began to preach about the good news of the kingdom, right? As it says in the Gospels, and we call them the Gospels for a reason, right? The good news is that in the representative one, everyone will be brought back. Okay? Does that make sense? So, in you, all the nations will be blessed. That is a messianic promise. Okay? Messiah means anointed one or chosen one. The one chosen to be the representative on behalf of everyone, right? So when we get into the story of Abraham, that is what's happening. And that's what the selection of the nation of Israel, the selection of Abraham means in the context of the greater story of the Bible. It is a precursor to what it means for us to be saved in Christ. You see what I'm saying? Saved in Jesus, the Messiah. In you, all the nations will be blessed. In you, all of humanity will receive its salvation. Okay? My salvation is not my own. It's Christ's work, right? His righteousness that saves me, right? It's me in him that is my blessing, that is my salvation. Okay? It's the same thing with Abraham. He is the son of Abraham. He is the son of David. And so that the fulfillment of that promise to Abraham is that when Jesus succeeds at his task, when he defeats death, when he dies and rises again, he says in the end of Matthew, he says, go and baptize the nations, for they all belong to me. He says, all authority has been given to me, given to the Messiah. Okay? So it's that letting go, the giving over of the nations, and then a reconstitution of the nations through the atonement of the Messiah, the work that he does in the world to bring everyone back to himself. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. I just wanted to give you guys that preface. We've been doing the reading here on the screen. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that anymore because we have 5 chapters to get through today. It's a lot of reading, and I want to just be able to stick to the slides and just take a certain section and then show you the slides and then, move on to the next section. So everyone got their Bibles? Okay, because you're going to rely on that more, less on the screen, if that's okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get into it. Sorry, let me just make some changes. So today we're talking about the call of Abraham, okay? So this selection of Abraham, can you guys see that? The selection of Abraham, which is what I have just been discussing, is super important. Just a reminder, this is where we are. We are in that transition period from the prologue of the Bible now into the ancestral tales. We're going to spend the next 6 weeks, including today, in the rest of Genesis, which is these ancestral narratives. 2 weeks on Abraham, 2 weeks on Jacob, or Israel is his name, and 2 weeks on the 12 sons of Israel, the 12 tribes, the patriarchs, okay? Then after that, we're going to be, again, ramping up. Don't take it like this is even in its sort of breakout of how many weeks per section. But yeah, we're still going to be speeding up because there is a lot to get through, right? And so, yeah, that's where we are. We're in the story of Israel now officially. We're on a story about all of humanity, right? About the whole entire world. Now we're just sort of focusing in on a story of Israel. Kind of think about it in the same way about the difference between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. What was that difference? In Genesis 1, it's all of creation. It's all of humanity. It's all of the creatures. In Genesis 2, it's the land of Eden, the Garden of Eden, 2 people, right? You're zooming in, right? And another more contemporary example I gave was Lord of the Rings, right? The prologue of Lord of the Rings, where Galadriel is telling you about the ancient history of the ring, and then you zoom into Frodo and Gandalf in the Shire, okay? If you don't know Lord of the Rings, sorry, just forget it. Okay, maybe a better contemporary Star Wars, right? Big old battles and the crawl text and things like that. And then you zoom in on Luke and he's a farm boy. Does that make sense? So kind of like that. They all got it from the Bible. So remember that Genesis, this is a little bit of a recap. Genesis is written retrospectively. Okay, so a lot of the things that are going to be, a lot of the stories that are going to be happening and told in these stories are going to be from the perspective of someone living in the future. Okay. So don't read it as though there's like a video camera, right? It's pointing forward to things. And in fact, there are some updates we can tell that have happened. A good example of that is in a story that we're going to read today. Abraham is said to have in a battle, chased people off as far as the city of Dan, is what it says, as far as the city of Dan. Okay. Do you guys remember this example? I've given this example. The city of Dan did not exist in Abraham's time. The city of Dan did not exist in Moses's time. So imagine that, let's just say for the sake of argument, Moses is the one who wrote this story. We don't necessarily know that, but let's say he is. It did not exist in his time. Okay, that city. You have to get to the book of Judges where it talks about the tribe of Dan conquers the city of Laish and names it Dan. Okay, does that make sense? So what the text is meaning to say, as far as where the current city of Dan is. Okay, does that make sense? So there are things like that. Also, from a prophetic lens, there are also things that you just want to make sure that you're taking note of in these ancestral tales. You could say they're looking backward from a present moment. They're also looking forward prophetically. Okay. Um, a perfect example of this is when they're on Mount Moriah and God provides a ram in the stead of Isaac as a sacrifice. And it says, to this day, it is said, on the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided, right? That's looking forward as a messianic vision, right, to the provision of God that will come to the mountain of God, Mount Zion, okay, or Mount Moriah. Does that make sense? Another example of this is like when Abraham goes to Melchizedek, the high priest. Melchizedek is a major, major, major important figure, even though he only shows up in this story. But later, the prophets are super concerned about Melchizedek. Why is that? And then it says that he brings out bread and wine to share with Abraham. What does bread and wine mean?
You don't know much about Melchizedek. He just appears in that short, very time.
Right?
But that's it. You don't.
But for some reason, the prophets are concerned about Melchizedek. So what do they know that we don't?
Exactly.
Right?
That there really isn't much more knowledge on who he is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what he means, it's not given to you. You have to sort of work that out. But he brings out bread and wine. What does bread and wine represent?
Communion, yeah.
The sign of the new covenant. This is my body. This is my blood shed and given for you. Right. So very important. So it's looking retrospectively. It's looking forward. Okay. And then this is what I covered. This is just the visual. So they're at the Tower of Babel. The nations are scattered and the spiritual rulers are assigned to these nations. Abraham is chosen. At the time, his name is Abram. Abram is chosen. From him, an entire offspring, the people of Israel, is generated, in whom all the nations are grafted in, right? Grafting is when you take something that belongs somewhere else and you organically let its image of an olive branch that is reconstituted back into an olive tree, even though it's a wild olive branch, right? This is image that Paul uses in the New Testament. So the nations are grafted in, and then all the nations are blessed in the kingdom of God, which is in Abraham, right? Does that make sense? Okay, before we get into the reading, I just want to talk a little bit more about Abraham, if that's okay. So Abraham, I just want you guys to think about this for a second. Abraham, you could say, besides Jesus, is the most important figure in world history, okay? Nearly 50% of the world's population anchors their identity in one person. It's really significant, okay? The stories that we're reading in the next 2 weeks, foundation layer stories of all of humanity, okay? Really, really significant to think about the centrality of Abraham, the father of many nations. He's called Father Abraham for a reason, right? If you think of the idea of a forefather or an ancestor, right? All of us should be thinking about someone like Abraham and the people, because again, I'm not saying it's not like Genghis Khan. I'm not saying that all of the 50% of the world's population is his offspring. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that everyone is really concerned about Abraham and what went down with him. You see what I'm saying? Obviously, for us, that evolves to Jesus, right? That comes ultimately to its fulfillment in Jesus. But it's a really important thing. And all of you should consider yourselves children of Abraham. This is what the New Testament is getting at when it says not everyone who is ethnically born of Abraham or of Israel is Abraham's son. What makes you Abraham's son?
I'm circumcised.
No. That's hilarious.
I had to put it out.
Yeah, I know, it's good. Grafted in by what?
That was the son.
The blood of Jesus.
Yes. But not everyone is grafted in. You are a son of Abraham because of what?
Christ alone.
Yeah, okay. So by faith you are. Yeah. So what Paul will say is that those of faith are the sons of Abraham. Okay? And in particular, he means those of faith in the Messiah, right? Why is that? Again, the importance of understanding this is that story Back in Genesis 15, the proto-evangelium, remember what it said? The seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent, right? So looking forward to the offspring of Eve, who's going to be the one who will reverse the curse, okay? And so when God goes to Abraham and says, in you all the nations of the world will be blessed, it's a follow-up, right? Your offspring is going to be the one who conquers. Your offspring is going to be the one who is going to destroy the serpent, okay? That same concept, right? The blessing of Eden that was lost will be restored, okay? So, really important figure. God says to Abraham, I am going to make your name great, okay? I'm going to make your name great. While the builders of Babel strove to make their own name great, they say, come, let us make a name for ourselves. God blesses Abraham and says, I will make your name great. Remember what we said is the difference between Babel and then what is going on in the story of Israel and the story of Jesus. What is the difference? What is the central difference? About building a house for the gods. You guys remember? Do we build a house for God?
No.
Right. We don't build ourselves a stairway to heaven. Christ is the stairway to heaven. He builds his own dwelling. He is the creator, right? And so he is also the creator of salvation, right?
We talked about David, and then
You're remembering. Yeah, he says, I'm going to build you a house. And he says, no, your son is going to build me a house, right?
So that just wasn't for Saul, because Saul wanted
Solomon Yep.
built the temple, but that wasn't even.
The temple of stone gets destroyed,
It does,
right?
But Jesus,
Right, builds the true temple, right? Yeah. Okay. So this is he says, destroy this temple and I will raise it up again in three days, right? And it says, but he was talking about his body, right? So yeah, just think about this. That it's the reversal of come, let us centralize, let all the nations centralize their authority and centralize their power, build a tower with its top in the heavens to bring the gods down, bring the power of heaven down so that they can harness and advance themselves. It's the difference between that and God selecting one mustard seed. As Jesus says, the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed that grows into a giant tree, right? One mustard seed that it seems impossible. Only God can bring this one person the success of, again, being as famous as he is today, right? I will make your name great, right? Not come, let us make a name for ourselves. God says to Abraham, I will make your name great. There's an inversion there. Okay. The directionality of let us build up versus God coming down. Okay. That's what is being presented there. So Genesis 12 through 50, following the prologue of the chapters 1 to 11, we now come to the ancient family stories passed down by Abraham's children. The remainder of Genesis now focuses exclusively on the origins and ancestral history of the Israelite people, as it expounds upon the various patterns established in the prologue and establishes the frame for God's ultimate plan to reconcile humanity to himself. So that fall that we were talking about before, we're done with that now, okay? Now it's, here is the plan. We're following up on Genesis 3:15. The head of the woman will crush the seed of the serpent, the head of the serpent, excuse me, sorry. Now we're going to be working on that plan of salvation, right? You could say God, I mean, we in the reading the text, God is the one who's working on that plan of salvation for humanity, okay? So I want to tell you about three main, let's say, takeaways for these chapters. Number one would be expressions of sin, okay? So exploring within these family narratives, relational brokenness, okay? A number of different failings, right? This is probably not even all of the ones, but lots of major failings that happen within these stories. Among the chosen ones, how are they the chosen ones when they keep failing all the time, right? That's a really important part of the story, is recognizing God's patience in working. You don't have to be perfect for God to work with you, right? God is working out the plan of salvation in order to bring salvation to these people who continue to mess up, right? Ironically, the central theme, you could say, of all of these mess ups tends to be how badly the men treat the women. So just something very interesting going on there, especially because offspring and Adam and Eve, the relationship between them is broken in the garden, but they're supposed to be, it's through the childbearing that the salvation comes, right? But yeah, that keeps being thwarted by how many times, you know, it's normally brotherly rivalries, sibling rivalries, or marital rivalries, you could say, marital problems, spousal problems. The men of the household tend to throw the women under the bus, and they tend to throw their brothers under the bus, right? And so that's like a big deal. Is we're going to be reading about this, and then we're going to find examples where we're like, man, this great figure, this great hero of faith really is doing some jacked up stuff. What's going on? The point here is, and I think I've already said it, but if the text didn't say, and God chose this person and God blessed this person, ... you wouldn't intuitively think that that's what's happening in the story, right? Our judgmental brains are like, this is surely not the person chosen by God. You see what I'm saying? So just something to think about as we continue. So in Genesis 12 through 50, some of the most interpersonal family drama of the whole Bible is put on full display. The text pulls no punches. One of the most important elements of this part of the Bible is the exhaustive acknowledgement of how one's proclivity to sin creates all kinds of conflicts, rivalries, sexual exploitations, etc. These passages set a significantly low standard in regard to who we should expect God is willing to work with in order to bring about his blessing to the world. But thank God this is so. God is abounding in his mercy, always desiring the good of humanity, no matter what they do. Okay? So nothing about Abraham is going to make it so that God is going to say, okay. You know what I mean? Like, the plan of salvation is going to march on no matter what action is being taken. Okay? Does that make sense?
These key figures do also have, the heart of Jesus, because they always turn back and repent.
Yeah, so that's a good question, or that's a good point.
There are some key figures that don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's what separates.
Yeah. You could say the seed of the woman versus the seed of the serpent. That's what separates them. Yeah, you could say the difference between Cain and Abel, right?
He did some jacked up things, but he had, God's blessing, and he fully, turned his heart and mind back to him.
Yes. Here's something, though, that I want to point out. David turns back, and David repents, but many of his sons will not.
Correct.
But that doesn't subvert the promise made to David that your son will be king of the entire world, your offspring, right? Yeah, so, I mean, they're the reason they're exiled, right? Anyway, so the point here is that the story of the Old Testament is Israel royally screwing up, royally disappointing God, royally subverting the image of God, right? And their role as a kingdom of priests. So they screw up, but the promise of God, he is abounding in mercy, right? It says, visiting the iniquity upon the third and fourth generation, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000 generations. Okay, so in the long run, always coming back around to the promise made to Abraham and made to David. Okay, and made to Eve. That makes sense? Second major theme of these ancestral narratives, you could say, is the setting up of future conflicts. Remember that this is retrospective, right? So the idea of what's going to happen in the book of Joshua, what's going to happen in the book of Exodus, what's going to happen later on in the book of Kings. It's setting up all of these future things, all these future moments. You could say it's a prequel, okay? Because the people who are reading this when it's, most relevant in their experience is the people who are living through these future conflicts and looking back, right, at how we got to where we are, essentially, right? And so when you have the story of the Exodus and the enslavement in Egypt, right, the question is, how did we get here? Well, that answer is given to us in the book of Genesis, right? The same thing is Babylon generally. The exile to Babylon is super important later on in the Bible, and we recognize that there's little seeds that are being planted in something like the book of Genesis leading up to. It's one unified story, right? And I want you to think that like nothing random is happening. These details that are given, they're pointing you forward to something that's going to happen later. Okay? And then the third major theme of this section, I would say, is types of Christ. Okay? What are types? Do you guys remember? Type means pattern. So precursors, images, these elements of the text that point forward to aspects of the Messiah, okay? Things about the Messiah that are shown in the text in radical ways, right? So we've already covered it at length, but the idea of the chosen one generally, the one in whom the whole world is going to be saved and receive the blessing of Eden. The priest king, right? So Melchizedek, we talked a little bit about that. We're going to, as we get into the text, we're going to talk more about that. All of these different things, I'm not going to go over each of them, but they're mentioned. They're little name drops. They're little moments that show up that you say, bookmark that, because later parts of the Bible are going to basically present it to you that all of these moments are coming, they're being gathered up in Jesus, right? All of these little parts of the scripture are pointing forward to ultimately what is presented in the Gospels. That's what's so amazing about the Gospels, especially if you have read the Old Testament and you have read it well enough to understand that you can't get to the next verse without being like, oh, wait, hang on. This is just following up on something from before, right? This is just the fulfillment and the ultimate expression of what happened in the past. Like, it's really significant and important. You find that the Gospels are like remixes of the Old Testament. They like bring everything together and they're just like, let me give you it all at once, if that makes sense.
This refers back to the previous covenant.
Yeah, the new covenant, the old covenant, but it's one story, right? So in Genesis, in the Genesis ancestral narratives, most importantly, established for us who God is personally. Okay, that's something significant about Genesis 1 to 11. There were only small moments where it is getting sort of having these personal moments, right? These really down to earth stories. Now we are looking at sort of personal interactions with God on a personal level. And so it reveals to us what he is like, how he relates to humanity, how great is his patience to continue to work with people who are so often trying to derail his plans of salvation, right? These stories for the people of ancient Israel provided sure foundations in regard to who God was for them, how God interacted with Israel's ancestors, and what he promised to do for them and through them, despite their faults, is the central point of these tales. Though the ancestors of Israel routinely and immensely fail, the ultimate message of Genesis is summed up in one of its last verses. You planned evil, but God planned for good, okay? In order to bring about what is this day, the preservation and the salvation of many, okay? So whatever action step is taken by the ancestral patriarchs and matriarchs that are screwing up, right? That are a subversion of what God wants for them, ultimately will bring about the salvation. Okay? Abraham is said to go out from your country. Just a little travel guide here. Remember, this is the Fertile Crescent. He goes out from Ur of the Chaldeans, which is a city in Babylon, in the greater Babylonian Empire. So Abraham is from Babylon. He goes up to Haran at the north side of the Fertile Crescent and then down into the Promised Land. Okay? That's the other major thing that I want you guys to recognize is the importance of the land. The land. What is this land, right? Today we call it the land of Israel, the land of Palestine, right? This is the land promised to Abraham and his offspring. It's the westernmost region of Asia, okay? The westernmost region of Asia and the coastland on the east of the Mediterranean, right? So if you guys know the Mediterranean Sea, if you know your geography, to the south of the Mediterranean Sea is the continent of Africa. To the north of the Mediterranean Sea is the continent of Europe, okay? And to the east of the Mediterranean Sea is the continent of Asia, okay?
Very simple.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's, and the land of Israel is a land bridge flanked on either side by sea and desert. So on the west, the Mediterranean, on the east, the Arabian desert, right? So if you want to get to Africa from Europe, where are you going? You're either sailing or you're going through the land of Israel, right? If you're going from Africa to Asia, where are you going? Through the land of Israel. Yep, it's a central for 3 continents. It's a central chain. Okay, it's a link. Okay, the land and its residents are inseparable from the biblical story. Understanding the land helps faithful readers of the Bible best understand its message. In light of this, there's so much discussion on this land to come. Okay, and if you go to Israel today, you will see this land for yourself. Okay, this is the promised land. Most people mistakenly assume that these stories are taking place in a desert. I don't know why that is. Maybe Hollywood has presented it. There's lots of desert. There's the Arabian desert and the Judean desert. There are some desert locations in the land of Israel. The land of Israel is actually climate-wise and ecologically very similar to where you are today. Okay, California. Think of the land of Israel as a miniature California. Okay, it runs about Modesto to Bakersfield. Okay, that's about the length of it. The width of it is like the Central Valley, generally. A fighter jet can fly east to west in like 2 seconds. I'm not even kidding. It's a very slim land. Okay, but in the same way that California has a mountain range on the east, a coastland on the west, a valley in the middle, highlands in the north, and a desert in the south. All of that geography of California, just map it 1-to-1 onto land of Israel. That's the land of Israel. So does that make sense? So you all, seriously, when we went, and we got in the middle of the night, and when we woke up the next morning and we're driving in our bus, we're like looking around and we're like, we're driving through the foothills right now of California. Anyway, it's a beautiful land. And in that land, speaking of Abraham in particular, we have all of the archaeology pertaining to the Bible, because this is where most of the Bible's stories are going to take place. Okay, so cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Mount Moriah, where Abraham and Melchizedek in these stories are, where the binding of Isaac happens, where all these things happen throughout the text of the Bible. Mamre, where Abraham builds an altar, and it lives most of his time. Laish, the city. So again, I spoke about this last week, the city gate in which you can go to today, that was standing in the day of Abraham when he chased, the army that captured Lot all the way to the city of Dan. That city gate stands to this day, and you can go find it, and go stand in front of it, right? Beersheba, where it says he built a well, things like that. Okay, does that make sense? And then finally, where he is buried. Okay, that's a place that you can go to today. Okay, as well as the rest of the patriarchs. So this it's called the Cave of the Patriarchs, and this big building is built on top of it. But yeah, you can go there. Okay, so just think about the difference between the stories that we have been reading, and again, now we are in history. We're not in prehistory, we're in history, right? Where it's like now we have a chronological record, right? An archaeological record. Now we have sort of a very sure understanding of the events and when they're taking place, where they're taking place, things like that. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go ahead and actually read now. Does that sound good? Open up your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12. And we are going to go ahead and get started in verse 1 of Genesis chapter 12. And I'm going to read just that whole chapter, and then we'll get through some slides, and then we'll continue to the next chapter and get through some slides, okay? Starting at verse 1. Now the Lord, remember, Lord is Yahweh. L-O-R-D in all caps is the divine name Yahweh. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the possessions that they had gathered, and the persons whom they had acquired in Haran. And they set forth to the land of Canaan. When they had come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the place at Shechem to the oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. From there he had moved on to the hill country of east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and invoked the name of Yahweh. And Abram journeyed on by stages toward the Negev. I'm going to pause there, and we'll pick up at verse 10. Okay, so I just want to ask you, why Abraham? Why Abraham? Thank you.
Well, he said earlier he's probably the chosen one to carry the seed.
Yeah, he is the chosen one. What is significant about Abraham as an individual, you could say?
Great faith. He's a man of great faith.
Okay, there you go. The faith of Abraham. So let's just continue. Hebrews chapter 11. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place to receive as an inheritance. He went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he migrated to the land of promise. So this God acknowledging and knowing that Abram knows me and will trust me. And we talked about faith in weeks prior, what faith means, about putting trust in God, right? About whatever you put your faith in is the thing that you ultimately put your trust for your well-being and for your life in, okay? Hebrews, the next verse, he was waiting for the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God, okay? So what's significant even about that verse? Where has Abraham been living?
Who is Anaz?
Huh?
Haran?
Yeah, even before that, though. Babylon, right? The great city of Ur of the Chaldeans in Babylonia, which is the false city. We've talked about the importance in week 4 with Cain and Abel, about the importance of, and the difference between the earthly kingdom, the earthly city, right? The city of Babylon, versus this idea of the Garden of Eden, or the kingdom, or the city whose architect and builder is God himself, right? It's the difference between dystopia and genuine utopia, right? Dystopia is when humanity tries to build utopia, but fails radically, and it becomes 1984. It becomes the Gulag Archipelago. It becomes all these things, right? Where it's the idea of trying to achieve greatness, trying to achieve, let's end poverty, let's end all these things, right? And instead, it ends in a massive tyrannical nation state of evil, right? It's the difference between that and whose architect and builder is God, right? The idea that God, through a spiritual rejuvenation of humanity, is bringing about a genuine kingdom, right? A kingdom that actually is going to thrive, right? That is actually going to be able to be sustained by God himself, right? So this is the hope that Abraham has, right? He's moving from a built empire, right? The city of Babylon, Ur of the Chaldeans in Babylonia. It's like you could say a sub-state of Babylon. And he's moving to, what does it say? It says, not knowing where he was going, the land of inheritance, right? Or the land of promise, a untamed land, right? On this land, the city built by God is going to be constituted, okay? That's what he's looking forward to. The faith in the future, the faith in what God is going to do, the faith in the promise, right? That is the faith of Abraham. Abraham believed Yahweh, and Yahweh reckoned it to him as righteousness. This is really important. Remember, righteousness comes by faith. This is really it is by faith that you are saved, not by works. Okay? Not by the things that Abraham does, right? Is he saved, but his faith in God's promise moves him to act in faith, okay? And I said it before, faith righteousness brings obedience. Okay, go ahead.
But right now he's Abram, right?
Mhm.
Not Abraham.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
But just
I just think it's interesting the change from
Mhm.
Abram to Abraham.
Yeah, that'll be at the end of today is the name change. That's how we're closing out today. So there's actually something very unique and special about that. So we'll get into that when we're coming. And I already got into this, but it's the people of faith who are children of Abraham. Scripture foresaw that God would justify the nations by faith. So it announced the gospel to Abraham in advance when it declared that the nations will be blessed in you. So you see, the people of faith are blessed along with faithful Abraham. That's all of you guys. Okay? The gospel beforehand to Abraham. We just read the gospel in Genesis chapter 12. Okay? So what is the meaning of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? The meaning of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is captured, you could say compressed, within "in you all nations will be blessed." Okay? And if you guys aren't getting it yet, or I'll just repeat it again, the chosen one is the one in whom we all receive our salvation. Jesus is our salvation, okay? The chosen one, the Messiah, is the one in whom we are blessed, okay? So the gospel preached beforehand to Abraham. So Abraham's faith, meaning his trust in God's promise, made him the primary choice to be the one through whom God will begin to restore blessing to the world. So he is the seed of the woman, right? And go back to the story of Cain and Abel, about the difference between Abel's offering and Cain's offering for more on our discussion on faith. Okay, you can go back to the week. What is presenting Abraham and Sarai, or Sarah, as is a new kind of Adam and Eve, right? Again, we are centralizing sort of God's plan of salvation onto a couple like Adam and Eve, right? This is the people now in whom I'm going to restore blessing. Abraham's story arc is going to feature moments they look really good, right? And then there's a retraction, right? And then maybe there's a big event that's going to happen, and then Abraham is going to be, it's like we're moving towards something good, right? And then there's going to be a falling back, and we're moving towards something good, and it really reflects all of our own lives, surely, right? About these rising and falling moments in our lives, the highs and the lows, and that is featured in the story of Abraham. So let's just go over Abraham one more time. He's a wealthy nomadic immigrant from Babylonia. He's originally named Abram. He's a descendant of Eber. Remember the root of Heber, or Eber is the root of Hebrew. And he's the forefather of the chosen ones. Just keep this in your mind. He's the father of Isaac and Ishmael, grandfather of Jacob and Israel, and the great-grandfather of the 12 patriarchs. Okay? So super important figure. What is he doing in this story, in this little passage that we just read? What does it say that he does?
He's leaving his land of Haran
Mm-hmm.
and going out by faith where God's leading him.
Yep. And what does he do when he gets there?
He builds up an altar for thanks.
Yeah. Does he build one altar? Hang on. Oh, maybe it's when he comes back, but yeah, it's when he comes back. So, what are altars? And why is it important that he's building altars?
The altars is like from the garden, is giving that connection to God.
It's where you make an offering, right? It's where, remember, we've talked about altars and offerings are about relationship, right? And in order to have a relationship, there's a sacrifice that is being made, a gift that is being given to the other, that it's a connection point, right? It's a ritual connection. And something else, just think about what altars represent. If I make a sacrifice on the altar of Molech, or the altar of Baal, or the altar of Asherah, what does that mean that there's an altar of Asherah, the goddess Asherah, present in a location? That's who I'm giving allegiance to, but also let's say, the presence, right, of worship is in that location. Okay? So am I the only one sacrificing on that altar? Not necessarily. I'm building an altar for this god, for this goddess in this place. It's where sacrifices are made for this god in this place. So what is Abraham doing? He's going to different locations and he's building altars to Yahweh, right? What does that remind you of?
So this is something that just popped in my head. Is that altar, will it stay, or do they like take it apart and move it later, or will the altar like permanently stay?
Yeah, good question. There are altars that we find in the land of Israel that are standing to this day. There are altars that we can tell have been there but have been destroyed.
So then would it be some marking saying like Yahweh or something, so that like if another tribe moving through the land wants to do an offering to Baal or whatever, would they then be like, oh, if that altar that's currently there is already dedicated to one god, can someone else
So you're describing what is number one, what is the reason for something like the temple in Israel, right? That there is going to be a central location for this sort of thing. But two, to answer your question, yes, before we get to that point, there will be standing stones, right? The point here is claiming the land. Imagine planting a flag and saying, this is this land, okay? So once Abram comes into the land that he was called to, his first order of business is to build altars, right? Build altars to Yahweh. Why is this the case? The altars, which are associated both with high places and with trees, notice he's building them around trees. So what is that imagery? Garden. Yeah, Garden of Eden. The oak of Moreh, the oaks of Mamre. Really significant. They both look back to Eden as well as forward to the tabernacle. What altars signify is the claiming of sacred space reserved for a deity. A modern equivalent might be the planting of national flags, right? So this spirit is coming here, okay? In this case, Abram's worship and sacrifice at the altars asserts this land as his and Yahweh's. This means it is the land that represents a new dwelling for the Most High God, a new kind of Eden. Okay.
Would it be sacred? Would it be sacred?
Yeah. Right. It's the idea of a sacred space. Okay. Not really a localized. There's a difference between a temple, but the idea here is that once you have the temple, the altar is on the outside of that temple. Once you sacrifice on the altar, now you enter into the temple, and so the blood is what covers the priest. Not necessarily literally, but the idea is the blood is what allows them to enter into the temple, right? And so what is going on here is he's staking claim on the land for himself and for Yahweh. Something else about altars that's very significant, think about this here. Altars oftentimes represent sort of the dawning of a new city, right? That when you build an altar in an untamed land, that's the first thing that you need to survive. Why is that? Because it's light and it's food. Okay? It's light and it's food. This is establishment of a kind of civilization. Okay? A kind of city that is being established here. And so Abram is representatively on that cosmic mountain every time. He comes up to the oaks of Moreh and he builds an altar. It's like what is going on with Cain and Abel. It's this practice of outside of the garden, making a sacrifice and establishing a connection, a relationship with the Most High. Okay? So the exile, remember Noah, when he settles on the mountains of Ararat, he makes an offering, and now we have Abram and Sarah on hilltops in the land of Israel with trees, making sacrifices underneath them. Okay? Makes sense? So Abram moves his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which were here at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Let's continue with the reading. Sound good? So this is starting at verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to reside there as an alien, for the famine was severe in the land. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know well that you are a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared on your account. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. When the officials of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake he dealt well with Abram, and he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female slaves, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say, 'She is my sister,' so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and be gone." And Pharaoh gave his men orders concerning him, and they set on the way with his wife and all that he had. All right, so the next story. What is jumping out to you about this number one mishap, right? This first, I gave you examples of the patriarchs, making mistakes.
It was a fib.
Yeah, there's a lie there. The consequences of that lie being very disastrous, right? Why is that?
I mean, his wife was with someone else against God's will.
Okay. What is the promise made to Abraham?
People that cursed him will be cursed.
I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you I will curse, and in you all nations will be blessed.
Right.
But Abraham right now is a curse for the nations, okay? Because of his choices. You see what I'm saying? Because he didn't trust God. What else is, I will make you a great nation through your offspring. How is he going to do that if he's throwing his wife under the bus to Pharaoh, right? Does he know if he's ever going to get her back?
No.
Does he, right?
He was more concerned about self-preservation.
Self-preservation as opposed to that initial step of faith in going to the land and saying, I'm trusting in what God is building, right? It's yes, I now have to find myself in Egypt. There's a famine in the land. I now go to the land of Egypt, which itself is a kind of Babylon, and that will happen throughout. It's like he's returning back to where he came from, right? Metaphorically speaking. And he is giving up his wife, the one in whom it's her offspring as much as his offspring that is going to be a blessing to all the nations. So number one, he's giving up his, he's subverting the promise of God, and he's not a blessing to the nations. He's a curse to the nations, right? Through his choices.
He's also trying to kind of take the words of God into his own hands in the sense of, like, what if she got pregnant and had a baby?
Interesting. So that's a parallel between what's going to happen with the story of Hagar too. Every time it's a good example. Every time that this happens, it tends to be a sort of misreading or a taking for ourselves what God has already promised, right? This sense in which we are subverting what God has promised. We're doing it our own way. We're trying to figure out how we can acquire what ultimately we want, outside of sort of the grand design of what God has instituted for us.
God make a marriage sacred too.
Right. Yeah. So the marriage, it is sacred. And the idea here is you're not just going to throw your wife under the bus and get away with it. Okay. Something needs to happen here to where you recognize this is just wrong. Right.
We get a lot of jokes and stuff from the Pharaoh.
I know. That's significant. Right.
Yeah, build up as well.
It does build up as well. Right. So that's something very significant because that also plays into, you're getting at something here. Let's see, how close are we? Okay, yeah, here we are. Okay, so the singing and taking, did you guys recognize that pattern? I've got that here. The singing and taking, it always, when you hear that language, it's always when some great thing that God has promised is about to be derailed, right? A great example of that is the offspring of David. Your son will inherit the nations. And then the next chapter, David was walking on the roof of his house and he saw the woman bathing and he saw that she was beautiful and he took her, you know what I mean? And so it's like this great moment. And then the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good and she took it, right? So they have this great promise that is given to them over here, but they're looking over here. Okay. But yeah, so what you just brought up, Hagar is an Egyptian slave. Where'd they get Hagar? From the Pharaoh, right? And so the continuity of this conflict is, so it is important to see and understand the continuity of the drama within the story of the Abraham, by extension, the ancestral stories. These events don't happen in a vacuum. They follow naturally from one to another as repercussions and consequences, right, of the injustice against one another, sinful insecurity, abdication of faithful responsibility, right? Every time it's a sort of repeating of the garden story where they're called to be one thing, they act a different way. Oftentimes, the man is passive, like Abraham by Adam in the story of the garden, right? It's sort of passivity, this sort of weakness on behalf of the man, and the woman gets thrown under the bus for some reason. That tends to be the case. From the story of Sarah to in this story to the story of Hagar, she gets thrown under the bus by both Sarah and Abraham's just sort of standing there, just being like, I'm just going to let it happen. You know what I mean? I'm just going to be here. And so
It seems like the woman makes the decision, really, but she's really supposed to be God, the man, and the woman.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, we'll just, good point. Yeah, I don't need to comment on it further. Yeah, we need to continue. Sorry, I'm like realizing the time, so we got to keep flying through. But I want you guys to see this continuity of conflict, so when we get to the binding of Isaac's story, it's a significant part of this process, because the idea is, how much will Abraham trust in the promise of the offspring? He keeps wavering in his faith of the promise. You see what I'm saying? So the test is significant when it comes later, is, do you actually trust what's happening here? Do you actually understand what's going on? Because every time and again, you keep acting like you don't believe it. And again, it's not really, God is all-knowing. It's not really a test for the sake of God's knowledge. It's a test so that Abraham goes through that experience of passing that test, right? And we'll get into that next week. Notice how, again, typology, the idea of the chosen one going down into Egypt and coming back up again. This happens to Abraham, this happens to Israel, and this happens to Jesus, right? The going down into Egypt and coming back up again, for some reason, except, yeah, we'll get into it when we get there. Okay, you guys ready to continue? Again, we're flying through these stories. We're not as detailed anymore. We're going faster. Okay. Hopefully you guys are appreciative of that. The point is so that we can sort of understand the whole scope of what's going on. I'm going to skip over the story of chapter 13, just because it is setting up something. Essentially, Abraham and his nephew, they get into a squabble, or at least their colleagues do. And so what Abraham and Lot do is they split up. Lot going towards the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham going towards the desert in the Negev. Okay, so what you need, and he builds a well in the Negev. So, did you watch that video? Did anyone watch that video on the land? You saw that? What'd you think of that?
I thought it was interesting how he was just talking about how the land has promise. This has very significant to God.
Yeah, it's a beautiful land, and it is in that land that the salvation plan is going to be enacted, right? Okay, so Abraham is now living in a different location from Lot. This is setting up the story of the War of Kings, okay? So, starting at verse 1 in chapter 14. Are you guys ready? And bear with me as I work through these names. In the days of King Amraphel of Shinar, pause. Where is Shinar? Bingo. Yeah, so Shinar, remember going back to the Tower of Babel story, and it came that they settled in a plain called Shinar, and there they built a tower. Okay, so Shinar, Babylon. So in the days, the king of Shinar of Babylonia, which is where Abraham came from in the first place, King Arioch of Elasar, King Kedorlaomer of Elam, and King Tidal of Goyim. These nations made war with the king of Sodom, Bera, King Birsha of Gomorrah, King Shinab of Admah, King Shemeber of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All these joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Dead Sea, 12 years they had served Chedorlaomer, sorry, Chedorlaomer, sorry, I cannot pronounce that. But in the 13th year, they rebelled. In the 14th year of this person, the kings who were with him came and subdued the Rephaim and Ashtoreth, Karnaim, and Zuzim in Ham, and the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in that place. So, who are the Rephaim? Who are the Emim? And who are the Zoim? Do you guys remember? Say it louder. Giants. Yes, the Rephaim are making war with the kings of Babylon. Very interesting story. The giants are making war with the kings of Babylon. 12 years they had served them, and then they rebelled. Okay, so what is this? So there's some international politics that is happening here, sort of as an aside from the story of Abraham. So there's the Empire of Babylon, which has its influence in the land, and there's a rebellion that is taking place. War of independence. I'm going to jump down to verse 8, okay? The king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zoim, the king of Bela went out, and they joined battle in the valley of Siddim with the other kings also joining them. So that's 4 versus 5 kings. Kings from the east, from Babylonia, and kings from the land of Canaan. 4 kings from Babylonia, 5 kings from the land of Israel. Okay? A big battle that's taking place. So, now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell into them, and the rest fled to the hill country. So the enemy took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all of their possessions or provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abraham's brother, who lived in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Okay, so the kings of Babylon, they are winning the battle. They're winning the battle. They're fighting in the valley of Siddim, that is the valley of the Dead Sea, and they're falling into the Dead Sea. They're falling into these pits of tar, and they take Lot and they escape with, essentially, it's not just Lot that they took a bunch of prisoners from Sodom and Gomorrah, and now they are fleeing. They're taking them as chattel, right? Out, these kings from Babylon. Okay, verse 13. You guys with me? Okay. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Aner. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his nephew had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and routed them and pursued them to Habah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the goods, and also brought back his nephew Lot with his goods, and the women and the people. So this great disaster that's going on in this international political disaster of the kings of Babylon, they're coming and they're essentially destroying the kings of Canaan and taking their spoiled goods. They're taking all of their treasure and their wealth and their people back. Abraham goes and he liberates all these people in this battle, including his own nephew. Okay, so just going over, again, this map. The idea here is the 4 kings, they're in the red here. They come and they fight around the Dead Sea in the south. Then a runner goes and finds Abram at Hebron, right? And then as they were making their way back out, the armies, Abraham grabs all of his men, and he unites with his allies, and they chase them as far as Dan, fight there, and then as far as Damascus, and win back the spoils, okay? Big deal, right? So Genesis 14 presents an immense international dispute that Abram uniquely plays a significant part in. In this passage, it is revealed that the 4 kings from Babylonia actually had significant imperial control over the Promised Land at this time, and it is here that the Canaanite rulers actually fomented a major rebellion. In the battle, the Canaanite kings are badly defeated, and the spoils are carted off back to Babylonia. But when Abraham is alerted of the crisis, he leads his own forces in a counterattack against the Babylonian kings and catches them by surprise, chasing them out of the land and officially restoring it back to its native rulers. So you have the kings from Babylon fighting against the Canaanite kings and winning, and then Abram forms an alliance, cavalry, to come and take back the spoils. This passage forthrightly communicates much about Abraham's role as the chosen one of the Creator God. While the nations fight amongst themselves, and particularly over control of the promised land, the Most High is with Abram and will protect him as he joins the fight to rescue Lot and restore the land to its native rulers. So what happens when this guy, this person who recently settled in the land, comes and wins the battle for all of these kings of the land? What's significant about that?
God is with him.
God is with him. This impossible task has now been accomplished by this underdog, by this newcomer, by this newbie, right? And all of the kings of Canaan are looking at this guy and like, what's going on here? Who is this guy? Right? We owe him a debt, right? He's now famous. Now he's a connection to have, right? Very interesting. There's so much going on here. Wars between Babylonian kings and Rephaim giants are always exciting, that it is easy to get lost in the weeds. The important part is that just like in the building of the altars in the previous chapters, God is asserting this land as central to his plan and central to the salvation through Abram's offspring, right? I will make your name great. You can see how that promise at the beginning, it's already happening. Abraham comes back with the spoils. He comes back to restore the people to their land. I will make you a blessing for the nations. Okay? So in the previous story, he was a curse for Egypt. Now he's a blessing for these Canaanite nations. Okay? You can kind of see how the promise is already working out. And you can see how all of this is typology for Christ, who is the slayer of the demons, who is the uniter of, he brings forth the captives, right? He sets free the captives, brings them back into the good land. Types of Christ, okay?
So he defeated. So he actually helped out the Babylonian kings and he defeated the Canaanite.
No, he defeated the Babylonians.
Oh, okay.
And he helped the Canaanite kings. The people in the land that he's residing. Yeah, it said they're sort of tertiary to the story. They were already had been defeated by the Babylonian kings, and now it's these particular kings that are like basically you could say they are at risk, right? They're vulnerable because the Babylonians defeated the giants, right? So yeah. Okay, important follow-up to the story. I stopped in the middle of it. The story continues, okay? So remember everything I just said, and let's continue. Picking up at verse 17, okay? After his return from the defeat of Ched, I'm going to call him Ched. After the defeat of Ched and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Sheva, that is the king's valley. And King Melchizedek of Salem brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. He blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, maker of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have sworn to the Lord God Most High, maker of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal thong or anything that is yours, or that you might, so that you might not say, I have made Abram rich. I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten, and the share of the men who were with me at Anur, Ashkol, and Mamre. Let them have their share." Okay, so something important is going on in response to this great victory that is happening. So Abram wins the battle. He is the chosen one by God who goes and liberates the captives. He brings them home to their land, and he goes to the King's Valley in Salem, and he is blessed by King Melchizedek. King Melchizedek brings out bread and wine to share with him, and he pays a tenth of the spoiled goods to King Melchizedek. Okay, so who is Melchizedek?
He's a high priest.
Okay, he's a priest. So who is Melchizedek? He's a priest. King of Salem. Is he just a priest? No, he's a king priest of the Most High in Salem, which is where? Where is Salem? Salem, Yeah, it's in Israel. Yeah. Salem is the proto Jerusalem. Okay? Jerusalem. Okay? So he's the king of Salem means peace, right? So he's the king of peace. Melchizedek, the name Melchizedek means, it can either mean king of righteousness or my king is righteous. Okay? So that's what the name Melchizedek means. And he's the king of peace, the king of Jerusalem, and he's a priest. Okay?
You don't have his ancestry, like his genealogy, right?
Well, no, he's a Canaanite king. He's in the land of Canaan, but we don't know much about him. That's for sure. So I want you guys to look forward to later prophetic passages about the Messiah, how the Messiah is said to be a priest in the order of Melchizedek. Priest in the order of Melchizedek. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And then Hebrews chapter 6. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. What is significant about this? What is going on here?
Well, what does that mean after the order of?
Like within the order of Melchizedek? So the idea is there is a priesthood that is Melchizedek's priesthood, right? His order.
So he's overruled Melchizedek, Jesus.
He is the Melchizedekian priest, right? He is the fulfillment of Melchizedek. Let's talk about priesthood for a second. What is priesthood? Okay, so in antiquity, priests were appointed as mediators between the gods and humanity. Okay, so to be a priest, I've said it in weeks past, but we haven't gotten to this slide yet. To be a priest is to be God's representative to the people and the people's representative to God, right? So a mediating figure, right, is what a priest is. Just want to note, in the New Testament, it says, you are a kingdom of priests. Okay? So who in this room is a priest? There we go. Awesome. Image of God language, right? Okay. So they worked on tending to the upkeep and purification of sacred space, namely temples or shrines, and offered sacrifices to specific gods in order to gain favor, blessing, and reward for the general population. Priests were intrinsic to the ancient way of life as modern-day politicians or scientific experts are to our way of life, okay? They're inherent, they're intrinsic, they're in the system, right? For a priest, the main concern was carrying on and passing down of all of the affairs related to the unseen dimensions of reality. That is, the daily rituals and sacrifices prescribed to appease the gods, as well as the preservation of the sacred cultural heritage of a society. Ancient people truly did assume that there was an inherent connection between the invisible powers of the heavenly realms and the real world tangible effects seen on the earth. So we talked about this with the pagan gods, that if you stop sacrificing to the god of the river, whoo boy, when problems start happening, blame the priest. Okay? Right? So another example is when the Christians in ancient Rome begin to get people to stop sacrificing to the pagan gods, and then let's say a famine happens, everyone's real mad at the Christians, right? And this is a primary reason for the martyrdom, for the slaying of the Christians, okay? Is you're not letting, you're getting all these people to sacrifice, to stop our sacrifices to the pagan gods, and come to church. And anyway, and that's causing problems for us, okay? So we'll get more into that. We're getting ahead of ourselves there, but when we get to the New Testament, we'll talk about that. So who is Melchizedek? He's a priest of what? The God Most High, right? El Elyon, the term referring to the highest God above all heaven and earth, the one at the top of the hierarchy of authority and power, used in reference to the Creator as being the highest God above any other God, okay? So here we have, very interestingly, a Canaanite king who is a priest of God Most High, okay? This is where I want you guys to think about this, about the allotment of the nations, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to find other figures who are worshiping Most High God, right? What it does mean is what's going to happen in this story is really important. The handing off of that priesthood to Abraham, Okay? Let's get into this for a second. So think about the difference between these different priesthoods, right? The Adam and Eve priesthood, right? Enoch and Noah, Melchizedek. Then you have the Aaronic priesthood, which is the Levitical priesthood, the priesthood of Exodus, right? The priesthood of Israel, right? And then Jesus. Is Jesus priesthood or order? It means like I'm part of this group and not this group, okay? This group of priests versus this group of priests, and there are distinctions between those groups. It says that the Messiah is a priest in the order of Melchizedek. Is that right? What's significant about that? Priest of God Most High. Okay, but so is Aaron and the Levites, right? Is the Levitical priesthood, let me ask you this, who does the Levitical priesthood represent? Yeah, we haven't gotten to the book of Leviticus yet. Yeah. The Levitical priesthood is the priesthood of the people of Israel. Okay? So does that mean that the Levitical priesthood represents everyone else? Is it a priesthood on behalf of everyone else? Is the Levitical priesthood a priesthood on behalf of Egypt? No. No. But is the priesthood of Adam and Eve on behalf of everyone? Yes. Okay? So what's going on here? The priesthood of Melchizedek is in sequence with Adam's, Enoch's, Noah's as a priesthood on behalf of all of humanity. It's a Canaanite priesthood, right? It's a priesthood in the nations, not in Israel. You see what I'm saying? No? Okay. So the priesthood is the order in which God is represented to the people and the people to God. Okay? So the priesthood of Melchizedek, of God Most High, is a priesthood on the outside of the covenant of Abraham and the people of Israel. Okay? So for the priesthood of Melchizedek is superior to the later Israelite-centric Levitical priesthood, right? Which is limited. It's for the people of Israel. Thus, the future Messiah's priestly role must be in line with Melchizedek's, a priesthood on behalf of the entire world. Okay? So what you have here in the story is, again, already an acknowledgement. I mean, we've had that acknowledgement already, but again, an acknowledgement of this figure Melchizedek is important because his priesthood is greater, more ancient, and on behalf of more people than just this unique little Levitical priesthood that we're going to have in the people of Israel, right? Don't get me wrong, the Levites are important. They're the ones who are going to be running the temple in Jerusalem, the tabernacle, things like that. They're significant. But the priesthood of Jesus is the true priesthood, the final priesthood. It's a priesthood on behalf of everyone, okay? All the nations. The point here is all of this stuff where we're passing on God's inheritance to, like, all the nations are divided, the gods are assigned to the nations, and Abraham and Jacob and Israel are his allotted share. It's always in the mindset of a future return back of the nations. You see what I'm saying? So what you have in the story of Melchizedek is a sort of handing off of that priesthood to the people of Israel. The priest king of Jerusalem is blessing Abraham, saying, "You're the guy." It's very similar to God himself saying, "You're the guy." Okay? You are the person in whom the nations are going to be blessed. You're going to be blessed by the Most High God. And then later biblical prophecies are going to say, but it is that Melchizedek figure, on behalf, a priesthood on behalf of all nations, that is the priesthood of the Messiah. Okay?
I said, so he's representing the nation.
Yes, Melchizedek is a priest. You could say that represents the nations, the Gentiles, right? And everyone everyone, right? All nations. And then the Levitical priesthood is an Israelite priesthood. It's a temporary priesthood. Jesus goes back to that greater priesthood, right? It's a way of saying that what Jesus does as the high priest, the heavenly high priest, is greater and more ancient and bigger, and it's on behalf of all nations. Okay?
Like the gospel will be spread around.
Yeah. Okay, so like let me tell you about the relevance of this. You're going to have groups today that make it a big deal that, like, you have to maintain the, like, Jewishness, to the sense that, like, Jesus, like, we are not all authentic believers for some reason because we don't keep certain Jewish customs, things like that, because we don't keep to the Levitical law. the law of the Levites or the law of the Levitical priesthood. Your response should be the true messianic high priest is an older, greater priesthood, right? The Levitical law is a temporary thing. You know, when you go to the book of Leviticus, it's a temporary thing. That priesthood is a temporary thing. Because the Messiah is the order of Melchizedek, which is a more ancient, older priesthood. You see what I'm saying? A priesthood on behalf of the nations. Yes. Okay. Okay. So when we get to Levitical law, it says that you shall not boil a baby lamb in its mother's milk. Okay. When we get there, I'll explain that. To this day, when you go to the land of Israel, you will not find people eating meat with cheese. Okay? I don't know why it's in the Levitical law. I mean, I can speculate. What I'm saying here is people still are trying to hold to the Levitical law today because they think that that is what's most important. Okay? What is going on in the story of the Bible is that all of that is a sort of restriction on a certain group of people to make a point that will be done away with and set aside once the Messiah comes and does what he does. So critics of the Bible will go to the book of Leviticus and they will say, look at all these stupid Bronze Age laws that you're like, some person did like a news PR stunt or something. And they were like, I'm going to try for a year to follow all the laws in Leviticus. Right. And they couldn't even do it. Okay. Like it's nearly impossible to do that. And the point is you're just missing the entire point. Right. And Paul in the book of Galatians and the book of Romans will go at length to talk about what is the purpose of Levitical law as opposed to what is the purpose of Messiah, right? Levitical law is a restraining on the people of Israel, right? That they are modeling what it means to be a priest of the Most High God as a representative nation, right? But that, it's like a constraint, but then a breaking forth once Messiah comes. He's a true priest, okay? He's the true priest. It's a Does that make sense to you? You understand what the Levitical law is?
I'm sure it'll make more sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
I enjoy burgers with cheese. Why is that? It's because my high priest is a greater, more ancient priest on behalf of all nations. Okay? That doesn't come with it the Levitical law. Okay? The one who represents me before God is Jesus in the order of Melchizedek, a priesthood on behalf of everyone, not just the Levitical priesthood, right? The priesthood of the Levites is just a priesthood of that culture, of that people, these customs, right? The priesthood, and what a priesthood is the representative one in whom God is represented to the people and the people are represented to God, right? Okay? And so my high priest, is in the order of Melchizedek, a Gentile priest. Okay? I guess is the point that I'm trying to make. Okay?
I love this slide, by the way.
Oh, great. Yeah.
I think that's a great visual.
Oh, cool.
And I think something that I'm speculating too, but something that I'm thinking could help us to understand why the writers of the New Testament are saying under Jesus is a different thing now, but why is there this temporary difference? I think we have to think about the day and time when Israel and this time needed that kind of priesthood and stuff, because that was the way that God was very much creating a distinct people from everybody else around.
Exactly. You're explaining it better than I was. Yeah.
During this time, but because that's what helped everybody to see, this is a different thing. You guys are going to be set apart on purpose, but eventually as Christ comes, now that's no longer necessary because again, y'all couldn't even follow the laws.
Right.
So why are we trying to keep making everybody follow the laws? It was for a specific time to help distinguish them from everybody else, but that was not always necessary now that Jesus has finally come.
Absolutely.
We need to have that again. We go back to Melchizedek. And
Now there is no longer Jew nor Greek, slave or free, male or female. We are all one in Christ Jesus. Perfect.
I feel like I'd be a little frustrated if I were them. Like, God keeps moving the post.
Sort of.
Yeah, we've been not eating cheeseburgers all
Okay.
prison. Now we're good.
You are actually making a great point as to what is the tension between the Pharisees and Jesus in the Gospels.
Right.
Okay? The problem is your work and your doing these rules is not what saves you. It's Messiah that saves you. Right?
Okay.
Then too, that's the point.
Not up until that point, right?
No, you're saved by faith throughout. Okay? The law is to set you apart. It is to represent you as holy. Holy means set apart. The law is that you are acting in such a way that you are acting as a kingdom of priests, that people are seeing the people of Israel and how they're doing things, and it is separate and distinct from the nations, right? It's not what saves them. The problem of the Pharisees is they begin to think this is what saves us, and if we just do good enough, then we'll be saved. That's in context of they know what happened to them in the exile, and it was for all of their sin that they were exiled. And they say, we really want Messiah to come, so we're going to be really awesome when Messiah comes. The point is, when Messiah comes, he says, you are doing it all wrong. You travel across the world to make one convert more of a child hell, twice the child of hell as you are, he says, right? And he calls them the sons of Cain, because Cain brings an offering and he thinks he deserves a blessing, and he doesn't get it because the offering is not a heart offering, right? It's not an offering of the heart. It's not an offering of faith. It's an offering of, I'm just doing the work. Okay? You know?
By the way,
Yeah.
just for clarification, Cecilia, I think it was bread with cheese, not cheese and milk.
Okay. There, bread with cheese. There you go. I love grilled cheese, though. Let's turn to Psalm 110. Psalm 110, and hopefully this will explain all of it for you, okay? I don't want to get there yet, but this is essential. So Psalm 110, whoever gets there first and is willing can read it. Yeah, go for it.
The priestly king, a Davidic psalm. This is the declaration of the Lord to my Lord. Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord will extend your mighty scepter from Zion. Rule over your surrounding enemies. Your people will volunteer on your day of battle. In holy splendor, from the womb of the dawn, the dew of your youth belongs to you. The Lord has sworn an oath and will not take it back. Forever you are a priest like Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will crush kings on the day of his anger. He will judge the nations, heaping up corpses. He will crush leaders over the entire world. He will drink from the brook by the road. Therefore, he will lift up his head.
Okay. So this is that really, really important Melchizedek psalm about the Lord said to my Lord. Yahweh said to my Lord, David is saying, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. And it says that he will judge the nations. He is a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Guys, this is the most quoted psalm of the New Testament, okay? It's a very significant psalm. There's a lot. We are getting ahead of ourselves here in bringing it up. But I want you to see how the connection between the Messiah, it's a messianic psalm, the one who will inherit the nations, right? The one who will render judgment upon the nations is a priest after the order of Melchizedek. Okay? That the idea of Melchizedek and nations, that's the significant thing, is that the true messianic priest, the true messianic figure is not a Levitical priest, he's a Melchizedekian priest, because it's a priesthood on behalf of all nations. And the one who is the priest after the order of Melchizedek is the high priest over the world, over the entire world. Okay? Making sense now? Following? Okay. Super important psalm. We did not get into everything there. The Lord said to my Lord, Jesus says, why does David call him his Lord if he is his son? This is a way of saying Messiah is God, right? The Lord said to my Lord, it's Daniel chapter 7. So many different things. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Man, guys, the Bible's so cool. Here's the deal. When we get to Psalm 110, Daniel chapter 7, Luke chapter 2, or chapter 1, no, Acts chapter 1, like these are all like linked things. And this story, Genesis 14, like they're all linked things. You see what I'm saying? Like they don't exist in a vacuum. They're not just like these little independent stories. You have to understand all of them to see the fullness of what's going on. Okay? Make sense? Okay. So in summary, Melchizedek, he's the successor to Adam, Enoch, and Noah as priest, right? He's the Canaanite king and ruler of Salem, which is Jerusalem. Who is Jesus? He's the king of peace, right? King of Salem and king of Jerusalem, king of the world, right? So he's the servant of the Most High Creator God. So here you have a Canaanite who is worshiping the Most High God, right? He's the priest king of the most ancient priesthood, right? So he's Jesus's priestly predecessor. So what gives Christ, Jesus, the authority to represent God to the nations and the nations to God in his human nature is he's a priest after the order of Melchizedek. Okay. So he's he's granted a tithe by Abraham. So this is the root of the tithe, right? Is this story, the one of giving a tenth to the priest, right? The one who is operating as the priest of the Most High God, and then one who he's passing on the torch. That's the main thing that you need to think about is this priest of the Most High God, a Canaanite priest. There's a handing off that's going on to Abraham now as the Levitical priesthood is going to be adopted in the story of Abraham, but then rescinded when the true Melchizedekian priest comes. Okay, does that make sense? So I guess that it's the same thing that's going on. This is a point that I made. It's the same thing that's going on when Abraham is chosen out of the nations. Okay, it's like God is now working with this. He disinheriting the nations generally, working with this specific people as his inheritance, but then he will reclaim the nations. That's the story of the Bible. That's primarily the story of Acts, is all of the apostles going and saying, hey, God's calling you back to himself now, right? Sorry, we had to stick on there for a while, but I'm glad you guys understood. And remember, all of that was the result of him winning this great battle Abraham winning this great battle on behalf of these Canaanites and liberating the captives from the kings of Babylon, right? So you can see all the themes and the threads. Let's get into the covenant. Chapter 15. We'll get you out before church, I promise you. Chapter 15, starting at verse 1. I'm going to go ahead and start. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, You have given me no offspring, and so a slave born in my house is to be my heir. But the word of the Lord came to him. This man shall not be your heir, but no one but your very own issue shall be your heir. He brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven and count the stars if you are able to count them. Then he said to him, So shall your descendants be. And he believed the Lord, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. Pause there for a second. So classic, famous story, right? So someone from your loins is going to be your heir and the heir of this land. And your offspring shall be as the stars. As the stars. There's one white star among gold stars. That was an accident. Huh. Anyway, so this is an expansion of that Genesis 12 promise. In you all the nations will be blessed. So your offspring shall be as the stars, right? I just want you to notice it's not simply your offspring shall be as many as the stars. Your offspring shall be as the stars. Too numerous to count, but also glorious like the stars, okay? So Daniel chapter 12, multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. This is the resurrection. Some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the expanse in the heavens. Those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So the New Testament is going to repetitively talk about the glorious state of the resurrected humanity. The resurrection promise is already coming in the story of Abraham, right? Your offspring, the offspring of Abraham, the children of Abraham. Father Abraham had many sons, and I am one of them. Who knows that song, right? The offspring of Abraham will be as the stars, glorious like the stars, okay? That's the promise made to Abraham. I will give you this land. I will give you this offspring, and your offspring will be glorious. Okay? Numerous and glorious. That's the point. And then let's continue. Verse 7 in chapter 15. Then he said to him, I am Yahweh, who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. Pause there. The Chaldeans are astrologers. Okay? So think about the star imagery with the idea that you came from people who read the stars and tried to divine from the stars knowledge. I will make your offspring as numerous and as glorious as those same stars, right? I will make you greater than them, greater than these stargazers, okay? And I'm giving you this land to possess. Verse 8. But he said, O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? This is a weird story, guys. Get ready. He said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, and a turtle dove and a young pigeon. He brought him all of these and cut them in two, laying each half over against the other, but he did not cut the birds in two. And when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Verse 12. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham, and a deep and terrifying darkness descended upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, know this for certain, that your offspring shall be aliens in a land that is not theirs, and shall be slaves there, and they shall be oppressed for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for yourself, you shall go to your ancestors in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. When the sun had gone down and it was dark, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kaddomites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Full stop there. Okay. What is going on? Speculations? Questions? Thoughts? He cuts a bunch of animals in half. He gives him a little prophecy. And then smoke and a flaming torch, pass between the pieces. Okay, so there's some heavy symbolism going on here, right?
Isn't it that's how you used to make a covenant, but because only God is the one, only He is the one held accountable to keep that covenant's promise. It's not on Abram, it's on God.
Yeah, you've read some commentaries. Yeah, I love it. Okay, so yeah, it's not telling you outright what's going on here. It's very mysterious. But the person reading it would know what's going on. Why is this the case? This is where we get the idea of cutting a deal. You say, I cut a deal. Okay. I cut a deal. It's the cutting of the animals in half, right? So Abram cuts animals in two, right? So a sacrifice, right? He lays them down one opposite of another, so it creates like an alleyway or an aisle, right? And the presence of God passes between them. Get any guess? She already kind of said it. So, appearing as smoke and fire, God passes through the pieces as a ritual symbol. God binds himself to the oath in doing this. I want to turn your attention to Jeremiah 34:18 verses 18 and 20. So this is about a covenant and what a covenant means, right? Those who have violated my covenant and have not fulfilled the terms of my covenant they made before me, I will treat like the calf they cut in two and walked between its pieces. Okay? And you're like, why is it talking about this? The leaders of Judah and Jerusalem, the court officials, the priests, and all the people of the land who walked between the pieces of the calf, I will deliver into the hands of their enemies who want to kill them. Their dead bodies will become like food, will become food for the birds and the wild animals. So what does the cutting of the animals and the passing between them, it represents, if I break the covenant, if I break this deal that we made, I will be like these animals. I will be like these animals, right? So Abraham is asking, how am I going to know that I'm going to receive this offspring? And God gives us this instruction of we're going to make a covenant. We're going to do this ritual that represents what's going to happen if this covenant is broken. Who passes between the pieces, though? Abraham does not pass between the pieces. Okay? God swears by his own life. I will make this happen. Okay? You follow me? Abraham's just sitting there. He's just watching it happen. Okay? So this covenant that is being made, it's on behalf of God. God is the one who upholds this covenant, right? It's not up to Abraham. It's a sure promise on God himself. God is making a covenant on himself, swearing the oath on himself, right? So as I stand, as I live, this will happen. It's a sure promise. It's a promise that is tied to the very nature of God. You see what I'm saying? So trusting in God's promise is the same thing as trusting in who God is and his nature. Okay? He's swearing by himself, by his very nature. And he passes as smoke in a torch, right? This is conventional stock imagery, right, of the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire that leads the Israelites through the wilderness, right? Shade by day, light by night, right? So, and he makes a berit, a covenant. In ancient times, a covenant was a formal alliance that bound the parties involved under a strict bond to carry out the terms of the covenant or else suffer the prescribed consequences. A covenant functioned much like a legal contract of today, although a covenant is far more serious. What's more serious than a legal document? I mean, who wants to get involved in a lawsuit, right? So he's saying, it's like the penalties of this contract, I will suffer. Okay? And is that true? That God suffers on behalf of his people, right? Really crazy and awesome. Although covenants were solemn oaths of agreement toward a specific purpose. In this case, I am promising and making a covenant with you, Abram, that I will do this thing. I will bring about the salvation of the world through your offspring. Okay? Your offspring will be as glorious and numerous and beautiful as the stars in the sky. Okay? He gives a little prophecy, though. He says, there's going to be some moments where it's going to seem like this promise is going wayward. Don't worry, I'm swearing by myself that this is going to take place, but your offspring will be slaves for 400 years. Know that they're going to come back, okay? For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete, right? Amorite is a generic term referring to the tribal kingdoms in residence throughout the hill country of Canaan, which can be associated with the various kinds of giant clans. That said, the Amorites, as natives of Canaan, were also described in the Bible as being among those who practiced child sacrifice in their worship to heathen gods, right? So Abram's seed is promised, and it is guaranteed by God they will return to the land after 400 years of bondage. This is going to be their slavery in Egypt, right? When the Amorites' iniquity is complete, at that time they will be totally subject to God's judgment in Joshua's conquest of Canaan. Okay, so stay tuned for the book of Joshua. Remember how I said lots of what's going on in this story is looking ahead? That passage is looking ahead to Exodus and to Joshua. Okay, cool. We have 15 more minutes before church. Are we good? Okay. So next chapter. You guys good? 2 more chapters and then we're done. Chapter 16, verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian slave girl whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, "You see that the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my slave girl. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." How awful is that? That she says, go have sex with my slave girl, and I'm going to take her kid. Okay, let's continue. And Abram listened to the voice of his wife Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her slave girl, and gave her to her husband, Abram, as his wife. Pause. 10 years have passed since we started this meeting, okay, in the story. So you can understand, are any of you that patient for God's promises, right? So just think about that for a second, right? That God has sworn on himself that this will happen, but still 10 years have passed and they're getting antsy, okay? Where was I?
Verse 4.
Okay. He went into Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my slave girl to your embrace, and when she saw she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, Your slave girl is in your power. Do to her as you please. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she ran away from her. Okay, so these are not nice people. Okay, Sarai, she's the first matriarch of Israel. She's barren. She's a barren woman, right? She's the foremother of God's chosen ones. She's the mother of Isaac, grandmother of Jacob, great grandmother of the 12. Okay, and the abuser of Hagar, her slave girl, right? And I just want you to remember sort of this insecurity, right? That is in Sarai about her infertility. God has promised this thing, but she doesn't believe it. Okay? Even so far as in the next story, when we come back next week, and God comes directly in a physical presence, comes and begins to speak to them, she laughs about it, right? She laughs in God's face about it, right? Not really. It says she was behind the tent and he knew, in his foreknowledge. But I guess that's the point, is God is all knowing. He can see her even though she's hidden from where his presence is there. And then he's like, no, I know you laughed, right? But I mean, just think about it. This is someone whom this promise was made to Abraham before, and he just gave me up, right? He just gave me up to this Egyptian Pharaoh, right? So the idea of Abraham modeling this level of let's take it into our own hands, let's do this thing that is not good, right? To just sort of manufacture. That's already happened, right? This example that is being set by Abraham. And now she is, so abusive to Hagar. So after Abram is promised offspring as numerous as the stars, Sarai's insecurity over her infertility becomes a major stumbling block. In an act of desperation, Sarai gives up her Egyptian slave to Abram as a concubine for him in order to manufacture the fulfillment of God's promise. So that's that artificial Tower of Babel aspect, right? The manufacturing of the promise of God. When Hagar becomes pregnant, she runs away because of Sarai's abuse. Definitely go back and watch that Jackie Hill Perry talk, that sermon that she gives on this. Okay, I sent it in an email. All right, let's continue. Verse 7. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, Return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for a multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, Now you have conceived and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, for the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, with his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he shall live at odds with all his kin. So she named the Lord who spoke to her, You are El Roy. For she said, have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him? Therefore, the well is called Bir Lahai Roy. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. El Roy, what she calls God is, you are the God who sees, or the God who sees. Okay? So Hagar, in desperation, she's pregnant. She's out in the desert. She's out in the wilderness. There's a problem going on. She might just die there. Who knows? Right? And what happens? She's visited. She's visited by who? The angel of the Lord. Okay? So let's just talk about Hebrew words here for a second. Malach means messenger or angel. It's a term that can refer to any kind of generic messenger, although it is most often used in regard to heavenly messengers. Okay? What does the angel of the Lord say to her?
They have a son and to name Ishmael.
Okay. What does he say exactly?
I'll go back to your mistress and submit to her.
But continue.
The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they'll be too numerous.
Okay. Okay. So what is that promise similar to? Abraham's, right? Fantastic. What does Hagar say about this person?
About the angel of the Lord?
Yeah. She said, so she named, verse 13, she named Yahweh, who spoke to her there. You are God of seeing. For she said, have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him?
Yeah, because no one really sees God.
Okay, but it says angel of the Lord. Does angel mean a created spiritual being? Does it have to? Okay. It just means messenger, okay? It just means messenger. Malach, paired with the divine name Yahweh, throughout the Hebrew scriptures, is a term that does not refer to any kind of generic class of being, instead a unique person, the angel of the Lord, a unique person. This figure, the messenger of Yahweh, shows up numerous times seemingly on behalf of the Most High God, yet he is referred to and speaks of himself as the Most High God.
So does that make himself manifest to be seen by this person?
God is, yeah. The angel of the Lord is said to be God, but distinct from God. We understand what's going on here, okay? So the angel of the Lord, right? The visitation of the visible Yahweh, who is invisible, right? And we talked about this in week 3. Can the invisible God be seen? There's a hard and fast rule in the Bible that God is invisible. If you see God, you will die, right? Because, and think about this, why is that so significant? God is so glorious. He's so holy. The sun has a kind of glory and holiness and splendor. And what happens if you stare at the sun for too long? You're going to die, okay? Like eventually, right? The idea here, yeah, you go blind, it destroys you, okay? So how about something that's not created, right? How about uncreated light? Not just the light of the sun, but uncreated light. How much more glorious and magnificent and dangerous is that, right? So how are you going to see God and not die? John chapter 1, verse 18, no one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known. Okay? Who appears in the burning bush to Moses? God appears in the burning bush to Moses. But what the text says is the angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in the burning bush. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flames of the fire within the bush. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from the bush. Okay? So, angel does not mean created being. It means messenger on behalf of. Okay? And this messenger on behalf of Yahweh is called Yahweh. In the same way that Jesus Messiah, who is the sent one, right? You could say the priest of God and the anointed one and the king, the son of man, is also speaks of himself as God. Okay? It's Trinitarian language that we've got going on here, right? The Father and the Son. Okay? We've got it in this passage right here, right? Judges chapter 2. Now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I swore to give to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. Is it God's covenant, or is it the angel of the Lord's covenant? It's yes. It's God's covenant. The angel of the Lord is God. Is God, but is distinct from God. Next week, we're going to have a story where there's 2 Yahweh figures, Yahweh in heaven and the angel of the Lord. It says the angel of the Lord called down fire from the Lord out of heaven. And in that case, anyway, it's really significant. Okay? You guys see how Trinity, this language of the multi-personality of God, right? The multi-personal God, the triune God, We're in Genesis, guys. Look how much Bible we've read so far. Okay? All right. This is what we call a Christophany. A Christophany, right? So the pre-incarnate visitation of the Creator upon the earth, right? So God, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. There it is again. In the beginning, the Word was with God and was God. In the beginning was the Word was with God and was God, right? He was with God and he was God, right? All things were created by him. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So the angel of the Lord is Jesus, right? Jesus was walking there in the garden. Jesus is there visiting Hagar, okay? It's amazing. And he's visiting Hagar by a spring, which is a well, okay? So in John chapter 4, the woman at the well, right? He is meeting outcast women by wells, right? It's these repetitive pattern stories that are following up, right? It's really amazing. And Hagar says, sorry, this is Hagar. She's an Egyptian slave girl. She's the surrogate concubine. She's met by God. She's the one who sees God and is bewildered at her sight, right? That how have I seen God and live is because God makes himself known in the person of the Son, in the person of the Word, in the person of Jesus, the Logos, okay? I have seen the God of seeing, the one who sees me, okay? So Jesus is the God who sees you and the one who you can see. It is absolutely remarkable how the heart of God is presented so predominantly concerned with the deliverance of the downtrodden victims of the world. In Hagar's story, God is identified as the God of seeing, hearing, and the one who allows himself to be seen in times of suffering. Here we see the seedbed of Jesus' Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Amazing. I love the Hagar story because it's that first time in which God is like condescending, bringing himself down, meeting a person who is down and out and lifting them up from the pit, right? Pretty significant. Go watch the Jackie Hill Perry video. Seriously, it's really, really good. Okay, we only have a few minutes left. So I'm going to do a quick reading. We have like 5 slides and then we'll be done. Okay? Chapter 17. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will make you exceedingly numerous. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you the ancestor of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land which you are now an alien, all the land of Canaan, for a perpetual holding. I will be their God. Okay. So what does Abraham do when God appears to him? He fell face down. That's the first time that has said this. I want you guys to recognize that the circumcision and this sign of the covenant, it happens directly after the Hagar story. Okay, so there's a continuity between what just happened with Hagar and what is now happening, a restriction, a binding that is happening to reassert the promise made to Abraham. Okay, so and he says, I will make you Abraham, not Abram, and we'll talk about that change of the name. But and then this is verse 9. Okay, God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you for your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins. It shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. So this is a new covenant, a different covenant from the one that was just cut 2 chapters ago. Okay, now there's a new sign, a new cutting. Okay, this is a different covenant. With this one, the Israelites are to keep themselves. So the previous one, I will swear by myself. This one is there's something specific that must be done on your end, right? Which is to keep the covenant. What is that? The circumcision. Okay. Throughout your generations, every male among you shall be circumcised when he is 8 days old, including the slave born in your house and the one bought with money from any foreigner who is not your offspring. Both the slave born in your house and the one brought with your money shall be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. God said to Abraham, As for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she will give rise to the nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her. And Abram fell on his face and laughed, and said to himself, Can a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Can Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, Oh, that Ishmael might live in your sight. God said, No, but your wife Sarah shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him and make him fruitful and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at the season next year. When he finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. And then it says that he circumcised everyone. Okay? So this is a new sign. To commemorate the significance of covenants, they were often entered into or reinforced via practiced rituals, symbols, or signs. In the Bible, many of the covenants instituted by God are accompanied by such signs. For example, the Noahic covenant, the sign is the rainbow. For the Abrahamic covenant, the ritual sign performed by God alone is passing through the aisle of the animal carcasses, right? And then the covenant of circumcision is a new covenant. It's a new deal, okay, that is being made. What's significant about circumcision in the context of the story? So when the circumcision is commanded, it's every male who is among you shall be circumcised. And that promise is having to do with the offspring widely, right? That there's a promise of offspring, but there's also a necessity of circumcision for the children to enter into the covenant, right? For them to enter into the covenant, they have to take on the sign of the covenant, that is the circumcision, okay? Meaning of circumcision. It's the forever marking of male genitalia, a branding that asserts Yahweh's ownership over the bodies of the covenant offspring, right? The shedding of blood in circumcision acts as a kind of sacrificial offering, as life is in the blood. The removal of foreskin is a symbol of spiritual devotion and fidelity to Yahweh's plan, and it's the ritual reining in of unbridled lust and the taming of masculine domination through sex via the domination of God over man's sexuality and the act of childbearing. Okay, so what just happened in the story? Abraham and Sarai took Hagar, right? Infidelity to themselves, to each other, to Yahweh's plan for them. I'm now giving you a sign to rein in this covenant, right? Every man has to recognize that their offspring is mine, right? And this is my plan. You're not just going to go off and do whatever you want, right? You're part of the covenant people. There's something bigger going on here than you just having willy-nilly sex bearing children with whomever, right? There's something important happening here through this offspring, okay? This is all set aside in the messianic promise, okay? The book of Galatians is entirely about people in the early church arguing that the nations need to be circumcised. And then Paul is saying, you don't understand the point of the circumcision, okay? And if you make them circumcised, you're making them people of the old covenant, not the people of the new covenant, right? They're the Gentile nations, right? You're not going to make the nations circumcised, okay? You're not going to demand that of them. When we get to later parts of the Bible, we'll talk about that. Acts chapter 15, the whole church holds an entire council about this, right? It's a big deal. But the point in the context of this story is a marking of the men of Israel to say the offspring are important. They're dedicated to God, and my reproductive process is dedicated to God. I'm part of the covenant people because it is through this offspring that Messiah will come and the world will be restored to God. You see, that's the point of the circumcision in this story. Make sense? Later biblical, even within the Torah itself, the first 5 books of the Bible, later parts of the Bible will already be looking forward to the circumcision of the heart, right? The idea that what truly matters is not that that you cut away the things of the flesh, but that your heart is marked as being having eternal fidelity to God, right? That you are marked forever. And then even later in the Bible, that's said to be the baptism of the Holy Spirit, right? Or the seal of the Holy Spirit, circumcision of the heart, the cutting away of that which keeps you from God so that you were bound to God, right? You following me there? Okay. You guys are a lot quieter today than normal. Yeah, that's why I keep like asking, like everyone's just listening. Normally people are jumping in a lot more. Names are changed from Avram and Sarai to Avraham and Sarah. Okay. Why is this important? So Abram goes from uplifted father to the father of many. And Sarai goes from like princess to like queen or like noblewoman or something like that. Okay. So all that's changed in their name is hey is added. Okay. Yod, hey, vav, hey. The letter hey is added. Okay. I didn't make this up. I got this from a commentary that it's almost as though God is giving of himself to make up for and transform the sin of Sarai and Abram, right? You are a new people, right? That you are getting this new name, and the new name is coming from me. It's my name that is given to you, right? Or parts of my name that are given to you to bestow upon you a new identity, right? He's refreshing their identity, that he's giving them a new state of being through their new name, right? That you will be the father of many nations. And by doing that, I'm giving you a letter of my name. So kind of interesting there. But so with that, that really concludes our first week on the story of Abraham. You can see how we're building towards something, and we're stopping in the middle of the story. The story of Abraham's life concludes really with with the binding of Isaac story and the death of Sarah. But I want you to notice Isaac was promised first in this verse when it says Abraham laughed, and it said you shall name him Isaac, which means laughter. And that's really significant. We're going to talk about that next week. We're going to talk about the Sodom and Gomorrah story, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Really important story. Another angel of the Lord visitation. And then the binding of Isaac story on Mount Moriah, right? Where, again, lots of things to cover. And we had a lot to cover today. But I appreciate you guys. Any lasting questions, comments, concerns?
Just a funny little comment, because she was already worried at the first time when Ishmael was born. Abram was already 86, and now he's like 99. I just think I think God does stuff like so much to go. I'm just gonna make sure that you all know this wasn't you.
Yeah, right, exactly. I want to pause before you guys go. I want you to acknowledge, though, I totally agree with you. When we think of 99-year-olds today, we think of like decrepit, right? This man is fighting wars. This woman is like attractive enough to be taken by these people. Like, I just want you to think, like, as you're imagining this thing, don't think about like, today's 99-year-old. Yeah. I just want you to, they are the age is like significant. Yes, they're old people. They're older than expected to be beyond childbearing years, but they're very active people. That's all I'm going to say. And youthful enough to be desired by these households and things like that. So anyway, just interesting. Yeah, it's just an interesting point. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate you always.
Been Saturday.
Angel, the Lord as being a messenger, and then, or it can be actually.
So Malak is just the word for angel, right? But the angel of the Lord is a specific thing. An angel doesn't mean created being. It just means messenger. So like I could be an angel if I'm bringing you a message in the Bible. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So it's not a class of being. It's a role. Angel of Malach Yahweh.
Yep. So that's
Then not just angels generally. I'm not saying that Christ or Jesus is an angel. I'm saying in those stories, functionally, he's acting as a messenger who is calling himself God.
And then I came to 9/11 where he wrestled with Jacob.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Israel means wrestles with God, right? That's right. It's really God there because he says, I've wrestled with God.